Let's get to our guest, Tom Pelissero, NFL insider for the NFL Network. Tom, how you doing, man?
Great, Jason. Glad to be back with you, man.
Yeah. Good to talk to you. Now, I don't know if you were privy to the big Zoom call that happened over the weekend for NFL running backs. Austin Eckler apparently spearheaded it. Can you just tell us what was the idea behind this? I thought Christian McCaffrey involved, Derrick Henry. Tell us everything you know.
This has been going on for a while, Jason, because all those running backs have been on a group text thread recently here talking about the fact that, some of their highest profile guys aren't getting deals to the level that they would like to think that they would inside the marketplace. So, I don't know how to set up a Zoom. I'm kind of impressed Austin Eckler does. He does have his own podcast, so he's probably got some more technological skills than I might here, but the discussion is ongoing here. And when you look at the running back market right now, and I know that I've seen all kinds of different suggestions about what the running backs should do, and they should self-unionize, the rules should change, there should be performance-based pay. Here's the bottom line. It is about individual contract precedent in the NFL. When you talk about moving marketplaces, there's a reason. If you go back a decade ago, one of the most underpaid positions, one of the lowest paid positions in the NFL was defensive tackle. Now guys are making $25, $27, $30 million a year. And that was about Aaron Donald resetting the market, and all that next tier of guys now suddenly want to get higher. Chris Jones holding out because he wants to be in that tier as well. I'm not saying it's as simple as, well, nobody takes the deals, but the best leverage any player has in any situation is withholding their services. When Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs don't take deals at the franchise tag signing deadline, when Dalvin Cook is still sitting out there on the market, and he does have strong offers, strong interest, but isn't signing a deal yet, this is the best thing you can do, which is saying, we're simply not going to take the offer just because it's the best offer we have now. We want to try to shift this thing moving forward here. Will it actually work? We'll find out.
Now, one of the tough things, Tom, is you just said strong offer for Dalvin Cook. Is there any way to quantify what the Barkley numbers were that he turned down, or are both sides just withholding that information and it's not known? Because, if he turned down 11 and the franchise tag is 10, they're clearly apart. But if he turned down $13 million a year, then it's a different story.
I can tell you it wasn't $13 million a year, certainly not in base pay. There were a lot of different structures that were discussed when it came to Saquon Barkley and the Giants. In the end, there was a strong base offer. It was upwards of $10 million per year for Saquon Barkley. And the guarantees got to a place that, I legitimately thought, me and Ian Rappaport are sitting on the set at NFL Network, and we thought that and Josh Jacobs could go either way right up until minutes before the deadline. In the end, they both ended up saying no. This is certainly a bet by Saquon Barkley. You look around the rest of the league, you got Christian McCaffrey, who's making $16 million a year. Nick Chubb is up there. Alvin Kamara, though, he's got this kind of backloaded type of deal where his numbers probably aren't as high as they look like they are on paper. But again, getting paid a lot of money here. You have to look at the risk that you would mitigate relative to the possibility of the market rebounding in 2024. Ultimately, Saquon got to a point where he wasn't going to take the deal. Now the question becomes for him and Josh Jacobs, do they show up come week one and make $10 million this season, or do they extend this into the regular season, start giving up around a $700,000 paycheck per week, knowing that because that deadline's already passed, the only thing that the team can do, it's not a multi-year deal anymore. They can adjust a one-year contract. And are either of these teams even willing to do that?
Interesting. Adjusting the one-year contract. I looked at the Giants' schedule, Tom. There's a real chance that this team opens 1-5 if Saquon doesn't show up. I don't know how much leverage that would give him, and here it is on the screen. If you assume losses to Dallas, San Fran, Seattle, Miami, Buffalo, and you're looking at a 1-5 start, without Saquon, does he then have leverage to get something done in the future? Can they do a handshake deal down the road? How do you I don't want to advise the guy to sit out. We know the Le'Veon Bell story, but this is a Giants team that's heavily dependent on Saquon Barkley.
When you go back to the Le'Veon Bell situation, Jason, just think about this in the context of what we're talking about right now with the running back market. You can find my tweet that I had after this. This is the first time that Le'Veon got tagged, where he didn't end up showing up until September before they tagged him the second time and he sat out. The first time, the deal that he turned down at the final hour, the final minutes, would have paid him $30 million over 2 and like 42 million over 3. Wow. Guys aren't getting that now at the running back position. But from Le'Veon's perspective at the time, he wanted to be paid like he was not only the starting running back, but also the number 2 receiver on that team. Now he ends up coming back, still got a pretty strong deal from your guy, Mike McCagnon there with the Jets. It obviously did not go well for anybody involved in that, but Le'Veon did make a decent amount of money, never could make back the money that he missed in that 1 year sitting out. And who knows where his career would have been. He probably wouldn't be boxing right now if he hadn't sat out that season. Yeah. So Saquon, Josh Jacobs, you got to take that history into account. Yeah. So let's think about this. All right, let's not get 6 games into it, because once 6 games are gone, you're talking about $3.54 million being out the window. And if the Giants are, to use your words, not mine, your words, Jason, 1-5 at that point, there's not a lot of point in begging the guy to come back and doing something. But all right, let's say you get a game or 2 into the season. What could they do? Well, one would be the obvious financial one, which is we'll still pay you the full 10 point whatever million to come back just for 15 games. Maybe a more likely scenario would be, do you say, we'll give you a chunk of the money now to show up? This is something that potentially could happen before the season. Not saying the Giants will do this, but just an option. We'll say, hey, we'll give you $5 million now and then pay the rest of the $5 million over the season. Or we'll give you an adjusted contract where we agree not to tag you in 2024. Teams are reluctant to do this because you set precedents when you make moves like that, and you potentially set precedents for the rest of the league that, players, if you just withhold your services, we're going to cave, we're going to give you all this other stuff. It's still early here. We're talking about July. There's no games won or lost the last week of July here. But, I mean, Josh Jacobs flew back to his hometown earlier today. He was on a 6 a.m. flight out of Vegas. He's not expected to come back anytime soon. And with Saquon, I don't get the sense that he's going to show up in the near term either. So we may very well could be down to that final preseason game and then to the 53-man cut down, which I want to say is around August 27th. After that's usually where sometimes those guys are going to come in. Will these guys do it? Will that continue to be a negotiation of any kind into the weekend? These are all problems that are going to be talked about down the line. But bottom line, teams don't want to make those types of adjustments on 1 year deal, just because then everybody's going to use that against you in the future. That's
good intel. Nyheim Hines goes down for the Buffalo Bills, awful injury. Instantly you got to wonder, like, okay, Kareem Hunt, come on down. Zeke Elliott, or does Buffalo, I don't have their cap situation off the top of my head. Do they say, hey, we'd rather just plug in some guy on the super cheap in the backfield? Or does Buffalo say, no, we're a Super Bowl team. Give us Fournette, Zeke, Kareem Hunt. I'm assuming no Dalvin Cook there?
I would not anticipate Dalvin Cook ending up in Buffalo, even though his brother James is, of course, there too. Dalvin Cook has going to have better offers elsewhere than what he's going to be able to get from Buffalo, because you referenced their cap situation. And listen, the cap can be molded. You can do salary conversions and other things, but the Bills have already done a lot of that, and they're relatively tight right now. They spent on an edge rusher later on in free agency. I don't see them going out and spending $6, $7, $8 million per year on a running back. Having said that, they certainly have at least explored the possibilities of bringing in one more. Remember, they signed Latavius Murray in the offseason. They signed Damian Harris in the offseason. They do still have James Cook. The difference with Nyheim Hines is he's this kind of chess piece, not only in the return game, but you can split him out. He's going to be, I think he had way more catches than carries last year for the Bills. So they would add some cool stuff in the offense for him instead. And it's a really scary and just awful situation all around. My understanding on Nyheim Hines is that, he's an avid water sports guy. He's had a certification for a long time, riding a jet ski. He's sitting there, just filled up his tank or something, and is sitting there. And then some moron who didn't know what they were doing crashes into his leg. So he suffers a left ACL injury. They'll do surgery probably later on this week. They'll see what else is there, but he's not going to be around for 2023. And, if you know how NFL contracts work too, Jason, when you have an injury that suffered like that, and it's even if you're training on your own, but, much less, on doing water sports or whatever, teams don't have to pay you. They can put you on the non-football injury list. It's up to the team to decide how to handle the contract situation. It's just unfortunate for everybody involved here. And certainly I think that anybody who's met Nyheim Hines is wishing the best for him.
Well, wait a minute. They could just say, hey, you suffered an injury away from the facility. We're not paying you your salary of $3 million or whatever. Isn't that an awful precedent for future players, though?
And forget about, that's what teams had to figure out here. There have been other situations. You remember, this goes back to the COVID year when guys were working out on their own, and teams could do different things where they could. I have hundreds of pages of memos in my head, Jason, so forgive me if I don't remember the exact things here. But teams were allowed to like send somebody a Peloton or some weights or resistance bands and then like give them a program that they could follow. Well, if the guy still, though, if he was working out on his own, if he wasn't following that program or whatever, they could still take their money away, even though no one was allowed at the facility. They could still NFI guys and not pay them. So you saw there was a grievance on one player, Juwan James, who was playing for the Broncos and then got hurt working out on his own, ends up with the Ravens a year later. But yeah, I mean, that was a fight, and there were other situations. Teams ultimately don't have to pay unless you get injured doing football activities or working out at the team facility. They're not on the hook for it. Some teams, based on circumstances, will pay the guy. Other teams won't. I would say more often than not, players do not get paid.
Whoa.
And anybody you're seeing now, Jason, you're going to see, you already have a half dozen guys go on NFI. There will be dozens more in the coming weeks here. Whenever you see that, remember that means that potentially that guy not only is missing out on football if he doesn't get back, because NFI can also be a temporary designation, but that guy misses the season, he may not get a dime.
All right, we'll get you out of here on this one, Tom. Kadarius Toney goes down for the Chiefs. I saw some reports where he was supposed to be number one on the depth chart at receiver. They lose Juju Smith-Schuster. You also have MVS, a couple young guys. Is this going to hurt the Chiefs significantly? I know Toney's had some injuries, but he's an electric player.
Well, and that's the question is, Andy Reid downplayed it and said that he tweaked his knee. We'll see what the situation ultimately ends up being. But Kadarius Toney's had a lot of injuries, a lot of soft tissue stuff through the course of his career. It was the hamstring that kept him off the field for a long time with the Giants. You just wonder how quickly he's going to get back on the field. I think what you saw with Kadarius Toney down the stretch last season was he is an electric player in space. He kind of reminds me, he's not built exactly like him, but he reminds me a little bit of Percy Harvin.
Yes.
Where Percy Harvin was never a fully dimensional receiver who'd run the whole route tree, but you create cool stuff for him. You put him in the backfield, or you get him out on a bubble, or you give him an end around or easy routes, and he could do it. And he'd make things happen once you got the football into his hands. That's the same thing. I believe they both went to Florida. Similar type of a deal with Kadarius Toney. I fully anticipate if he's able to get back, if this is a minor type of a deal like Andy Reid indicated that it was, that he's going to be a big-time player within that offense. But also, let's be honest, Jason, it's the Chiefs. Everybody said, what's going to happen without Tyreek Hill? Now it's what's going to happen without Juju Smith-Schuster. What might happen without Kadarius Toney? Wild guess. Patrick Mahomes is throwing for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, no matter who is out there with him.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.